40 years. That's half a lifetime. 2 generations. As many as 10 U.S. presidents. When a couple has been married 40 years, they celebrate with gifts of rubies. But what does a ministry do? If you're the Bible Broadcasting Network, you pause for just a moment to reflect on all that God has done. You acknowledge that God built a team of staff and listeners who are committed to Him and united with the goal of taking the whole Word to the whole world. And you boldly proclaim, "To God be the glory, great things He hath done."
So we could have no way imagined.
This is God's ministry.
So He just put it together. I couldn't say I put anything together.
Let's begin a little farther than 40 years back with a B-36 bomber mechanic and Korean War veteran stationed in Rapid City, North Dakota. It was there, alone in a barracks, that Airman Lowell Davey opened his Bible to John 3:3 and knelt beside a bunk to place his faith in Jesus Christ. What a transformation.
And I got so excited I went out to work the next day, and I was up and all through that airplane and walking the wings. I was preaching, talking, telling people what happened. I'm sure it probably looked like I was way out in left field, but I was so excited what God had done.
Lowell quickly sensed God's call to full-time service and began to prepare for ministry. After graduating from Bob Jones University, Lowell continued to pursue evangelism, working part of the year ministering to servicemen in Norfolk, Virginia, through missions to military.
And I would sit there and I'd talk to them. I'd witness to them, teach them the Bible, all this, so maybe 2 or 3. In fact, I had some nights they never even went to bed. Up all night long, dealing with servicemen and witnessing to them, answering their questions, some of them getting saved.
It was at missions to military where Lowell met a tall, lanky sailor named Judd Mast. They hit it off right away and have served God together ever since. And that wasn't the only lasting relationship to come from those days.
During that time, there were a couple of gals that came in for Bible studies. And one of the girls was Georgie Query, who became Georgie Davy, and the other was Ann Price, who became Ann Mast. Lowell fell before I did. It took me about a year to catch on and catch up.
There was no question that God was nurturing in Lowell's heart a vision for reaching people. Christian radio became the most efficient means.
Lowell had gotten this burden for radio, and he began going over to the library, going through the books, seeing if there was anything available. You know, he didn't know a whole lot about it, but he knew you had to have a frequency. So he began to look and had found one he thought. He wasn't sure. So we said, okay, what are we going to do?
Well, you know, if anybody sits around and you think about what affects our society today, mass communication. I mean, as we grew up, what did we do? We listened to radio and then got into television, and it influences the people. And we just saw the power of it, the power of what it could do, not ever thinking that we would ever be involved in it.
The very first offer was made on a station on May 28, 1968. As it worked out, that offer wasn't accepted, but the experience served to make the burden and vision for Christian radio more clear. They continued trying, and the Lord worked miracles. There's no other way to describe how so many insurmountable roadblocks disappeared one by one. There were roadblocks with finances, with other applicants, with lawyers, and with the FCC. But God's plan wasn't going to be thwarted. On Christmas Eve 1970, the telegram arrived saying that their construction permit had been granted. They could begin to build WYFI.
Then I said, now what do I do? But it was just so exciting. It was just an adventure. And don't ask me, you know, how did we know what to do? It was just one step at a time. We worked day and night to get it going. But that's how God did.
The challenges were only beginning. God supplied funding for brand new equipment, but things didn't go as expected.
From the transmitter to every piece of equipment we put in out in Dismal Swamp, not one piece of equipment worked brand new from the factory.
In fact, it took us over a year to get a one. We were in this church there in Norfolk, and we had told them, you know, of course, that we were starting this radio station. And there were people in the church that were very interested, and they'd say, when are you going to start? And Lowell would say, well, it should be within the week. We're just waiting for this one piece of equipment. And it got to the place where we didn't go to church for a little over a month because we were so embarrassed that we weren't on the air yet because we couldn't explain it, but nothing worked.
God used those trials to teach the fledgling ministry about spiritual battles and lay a firm foundation of faith that we continue to stand on today. At last, WYFI signed on at 5 p.m. October 2nd, 1971. And then they had to keep it on.
And I learned right along with the team, but this is radio. And all I basically knew was tape recorders. And if people could have saw what was going on in my side of the microphone, they wouldn't have believed it.
I had never had any experience announcing whatsoever, so I very simply wrote down everything I was going to say. The song would stop, I would open the mic, I would read what I was going to say, I would close the mic, and I would start the music. And that's all there was to it.
Skills developed and new technology emerged, but from the very first day, our philosophy of ministry has not changed. First and foremost, we seek to honor the Lord in all that we do. BBN stations are non-commercial, and we trust God to meet our financial needs through gifts from His people. Broadcasters don't pay for airtime, so teaching can be selected with an unwavering commitment to sound biblical doctrine, not money and contracts. And our music is of the same conservative style that the ministry was founded and built on. We're often asked to explain and re-explain how we operate, but it really is that simple.
I can remember when he was putting it together, we didn't live far from a grocery store, and he said to me more than once, he said, if BBN ever becomes anything other than ministry, I'm going to go bag groceries. He said, I'd rather bag groceries and support my family than to be out of the ministry. He said, BBN is not a job, it's not anything but a ministry.
Not long after WYFI went on the air, Lowell sensed divine leading to expand with a second radio station.
And I saw what God was doing, and the excitement of broadcasting and reaching people, and when a door would open. Don't ask me how it all worked out. It was just that we need to do that.
They looked in the Triad area of North Carolina, and God once again had to remove insurmountable obstacles. Through tremendous risk and great faith, WHPE signed on in October of 1974. Now with 2 fledgling stations, we were officially a network. Ensuing decades brought a move to satellite for more cost-effective delivery, and then dozens of new radio stations across America. Each new station was purchased from funds raised in our spring special project Share-a-thon. Then in the fall, we would have another Share-a-thon where listeners would make faith promises and send support to keep the stations operating. We believe God led us from the very beginning to partner with listeners.
Let's let God's people get involved. Let's let them share the financial burden. If we minister to them a biblical principle, they minister to us so we can minister to others.
That biblical principle is found in Galatians 6:6. Being listener-supported has helped us keep our focus on ministry instead of entertainment. And God has faithfully moved in the hearts of His people to not only support BBN, but to enthusiastically help us expand. Throughout the years of battles and building, the Lord was continuously tugging at Lowell's heart to move into another language and build radio stations in other countries. Jesus asked His followers to make disciples of all nations. He gave us a great commission, not a great consideration, and would not have asked us to do something that was impossible. It didn't seem like it could come quickly enough, but at last, in the mid-90s, it was the Lord's timing to take a giant step in our part of the Great Commission. On September 1st, 1996, we began broadcasting in a language other than English for the very first time. At 8 p.m., Red de Radiodifusión Bíblica signed on in Spanish over WYFQ AM in Charlotte. How did we know the BBN format would work in Spanish?
By the time we got through with radio here, I knew the format that would work. And it didn't matter what language it was in, it would work. It was Bible teaching, quality Christian music, and ministering to the family, and that's what we wanted to do. So when we went into South America, it wasn't a matter of creating a new idea or meeting the so-called cultural things. That was incidental. This was what would work.
The Spanish ministry has since grown to 93 stations in 14 countries and covers an even greater population than BBN reaches in English. It was also in September of '96 that we launched our very first website. At the time, it was little more than a gospel tract with a program guide and station listing. But it was the first tool that gave us the ability to instantly share the gospel with people all around the world. Early on, we looked for ways to use the internet for ministry, and only 6 months later, in March of '97, God opened the door for us to stream BBN audio on the web.
Now, some of our programs are available on demand, too.
The next language we moved into was Portuguese. Once again, studios had to be constructed, programming had to be found and copied into a computer system, satellite transmission systems had to be set up, and we needed to put together a staff with a command of the language. At last, on May 10, 1999, BBN took to the airwaves in Curitiba, Brazil. With its 300,000-watt power output, Curitiba remains our most powerful FM station in the world. Meanwhile, the internet continued to explode onto the world scene. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be online. We learned what an inbox was and found ours being filled with emails from people all around the globe that were enjoying our live streaming and on-demand programs. As usual, we asked how we could maximize technology to carry God's message to still more people. The answer was additional languages, only this time delivered over the internet instead of via satellite and radio stations. Our first internet-only language was Chinese, and streaming began on November 30th, 2000. With the time zone difference, our 11 a.m. Eastern start time worked out to be midnight December 1st in Beijing. Dr. Lowell Davey called in from Winder, Georgia to lead in prayer.
Father, may this be a great beginning of what you're going to do to redeem many for the gospel's sake, and we just commit it to you. Thank you, Father, for the open door. And Lord, help our eyes and our hearts and our minds to be committed to you as we go to that land with the good news of your word.
Now that we had most of the bugs worked out, the next languages could be developed more quickly. Japanese streaming was launched July 2nd, 2001. Korean streaming began a few months later on October 31st. We launched German at the end of October in 2003, and Russian about a year later in September of 2004. With all the languages and cultures represented by our very diverse staff, the lessons learned have been many. But despite those differences, we operate as a team, where each member adheres to the same philosophy and goals that BBN was founded upon. Whether one tunes into BBN Russian, BBN Chinese, or BBN English, they should hear the same kind of music and doctrine folks have come to recognize as BBN. So, what next? What could we do to reach people in all nations with greater effectiveness? The idea came from some of our staff attempting evangelism in online chat rooms during the late 90s. We refined the concept and came up with a customized way to have live, one-on-one evangelistic chats that maintain privacy and yet provide full accountability for our staff and volunteers. And it's effective. We see people come to Christ daily through the chat ministry. As part of the vision the Lord gave us for chat, we knew people would come to Christ and need to be taught. Many of those people would be in other countries and in areas without Bible-teaching churches. So at about the same time we were developing chat, we were also constructing the BBN Bible Institute. With over 30 years of radio broadcasting under our belts, we had amassed thousands of recorded Bible teaching lessons.
We went back to the great Bible teachers that we have and some of these guys, and we just said, okay, let's divide this up in classes. Let's make these great Bible teachers, most of them in heaven. But they were such teachers of their day, and we've captured much of their material, and of course present day as well, to put that into Bible courses and then apply it and then make it free.
The Lord made it possible for us to develop a system that allows students to listen to lessons take tests, keep track of grades, and earn certificates, all online at any time of day and all for free. BBNBI first went public on June 1st, 2006, and now has over 90,000 active students from 157 countries. Hey, let's backtrack a little. Remember all the Y2K hype? To make the most out of the calendar change to 2000, we wanted to see if our listeners would help us distribute 1 million invitation to listen cards in 1 year. Each card posed the thought-provoking question, if I die tonight, my soul will be in H, followed by a blank line, tomorrow morning. That year, listeners handed out more than the million we were aiming for, and they did it with so much excitement that we decided to try it again the next year. Today, it is our privilege to partner with thousands of listeners who hand out over 14 million ITL cards annually. ITL cards are available in all languages we broadcast in. And there are still other aspects of BBN ministry. We have a free monthly newsletter called The Voice that provides encouraging articles and ministry news to our contributors. Twice a month, we send out an e-newsletter called BBN Global that shares testimonies from listeners. We also quickly hopped on the social networking wave and minister to tens of thousands of people daily on Facebook and Twitter.
I always say there's a reason God doesn't show you the future. It's because He's scared you to death. There's very little, if anything, we're doing today that was even invented in 1971. So we could have in no way imagined.
I have to say is, our theme song says, "To God be the glory, great things He has done." Played every day since the day we started. And then God brought another station along and said, well, yeah, that'll work. And then we've got to knock on doors. Well, yeah, that'll work. And so He just put it together. I couldn't say I put anything together. He did. And that's why we say, to God be the glory, great things He's done.
So here we are, celebrating 40 years of God's goodness. And the BBN story is still being written. Should the Lord tarry, we'll lay every past success at the feet of the Savior, lock our eyes on the road ahead, and charge toward the next opportunity to reach our world with the gospel, always building with the same simple philosophy of ministry that WYFI was started with all those years ago. This video was produced as a surprise to Dr. Davy, partly so we could use it as a way of saying thank you for inviting us to be co-laborers, and also so we could convey the story of BBN in the personal way you share with family. All the footage of Dr. Davy was taken from interviews we asked him to provide for archival purposes so future generations could hear his first-hand account of what God did. With that in mind, we couldn't think of a better way to leave the focus where it belongs than with some candid words from our founders.
This is God's ministry. We are amazed. We're as amazed as anyone else, more so because we know us, that this is what God's done.
I look at what BBN's done in the radio stations in South America, North America, and internet around the world, and all that's going on and touching hundreds of thousands of lives every day. It's not what I've done. I've just been part of the team that's made it go happen, and we just had a great time together. And so I thank God for it. And to Him be the glory, great things He's done.